The night sky burned with falling fire as the human soldier's ship tore apart above the alien world. He was thrown from his seat, alarms screaming, smoke filling his lungs, and then came the crash. When his eyes opened again, the ground was cold beneath him, and strange shadows moved above. He tried to reach for his sidearm, but it was gone, taken or lost in the wreck. The figures around him were tall, taller than any human he had seen, their bodies wrapped in shining armor made from metal and bone, their faces hidden behind helmets carved with symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. Their voices echoed like thunder in a language he did not know, harsh and sharp, yet filled with rhythm. As they drew closer, one of them removed her helmet, and for the first time, he saw her face. It was the face of a woman, but different. Her eyes glowed faint gold, her skin pale as moonlight, her hair braided like chains of silver. The soldier's breath caught. There were many of them, all women, each armed with curved weapons that shimmered like light itself. They surrounded him in a circle, their boots heavy on the ground, their movements sharp and perfect. The soldier realized at once he was not among humans anymore. The tallest warrior stepped forward, her expression unreadable. She spoke, her voice strong and commanding. The other maidens lowered their weapons slightly, but none looked away from him. Her words rolled across the air, and though he could not understand them, he knew what they meant. They were deciding his fate. The soldier struggled to his knees, raising his hands slowly. "A sign of surrender," he whispered. "I'm not your enemy." But the sound of his voice made them all recoil. Shock filled their faces, and whispers spread quickly among the maidens. They had never heard a man speak. They had never even seen one. One of them stepped closer, her weapon shaking as she pointed it at him. Her lips trembled as she whispered to the others, her eyes wide with both fear and wonder. The soldier looked around, heart pounding, and realized something strange. In their world, in their legends, men did not exist. Before he could speak again, the tall leader lifted her hand. Chains of light burst from the ground, wrapping around his arms and chest, pulling him down. The soldier gritted his teeth, struggling, but the chains held like steel. The maidens closed in, staring at him like hunters staring at a beast they had only heard of in stories. One touched his face with the edge of her blade, almost gently. Her voice cracked with disbelief, and though he could not understand, he knew the meaning. She was saying, "He is real." The soldier's heart sank, captured, weaponless, chained, surrounded by warriors who had never known his kind. His mind raced with questions. What would they do with him? Why had they spared him? And why did they look at him with such fear and awe? Every movement he made was studied. Every breath was a mystery to them. The warriors lifted him from the ground, their strength far greater than his. They dragged him through the forest of glowing trees, the air thick with strange scents. The soldier saw the broken remains of his ship burning in the distance, last link to his home now gone. He clenched his fists, feeling the weight of his situation sink deeper. At the edge of the forest, the land opened into a valley, and there it stood, a fortress carved from the mountain itself, its walls rising like the teeth of a beast, glowing symbols written across its surface. The maidens marched with him toward its gates, silent now, their eyes locked on him as if he might vanish at any moment. The gates opened with a sound like thunder, revealing halls of stone and firelight. The soldier was dragged through corridors filled with more warriors. Every face turned toward him, every voice whispered, and fear spread like a storm. Some backed away, others raised their weapons, but all of them stared. He was a living ghost, a myth made flesh, inside a chamber lit by blue flames. They bound him to a stone pillar, the chains tightening around his body. The leader stepped forward, removing her helmet once more. Her eyes burned with questions, her voice sharp with command. She pointed at him, her words ringing out like judgment. The soldier swallowed hard. He did not know their language, but he understood the silence that followed. They would not kill him, not yet. They wanted to know what he was. As the chamber filled with watching eyes, the soldier closed his. Alone, captured, surrounded by maidens of war who had never seen a man. He whispered to himself, "Survive," because he knew this was only the beginning. Asterisk. The human soldier was dragged deeper into the fortress, the chains of light pulling against his skin. The maiden's boots struck the stone floor with heavy rhythm, echoing through the vast halls. Every corridor glowed faintly with symbols carved into the walls, each line shining like fire trapped in rock. The air was heavy, filled with the smell of burning oil and the hum of strange machines hidden in the shadows. The soldier kept his head up, though exhaustion pressed against him. He counted every turn, every hall, forcing his mind to remember the way. Survival was the only thought that kept him steady. But everywhere he looked, he saw eyes watching him, studying him, judging him. The fortress seemed alive, its walls shifting with light, as if they remembered every step of those who walked within. He was led into a great chamber, vast and silent, where stone pillars rose like trees. Chains hung from the ceiling, weapons lined the walls, and torches burned blue with unnatural fire. At the far end stood a dais of black stone, carved in the shape of wings. The maidens pulled him forward, forcing him to kneel at the center. Their voices rose together, chanting words he could not understand, yet the rhythm sent chills through him. The leader raised her hand and the others fell silent. Her golden eyes locked on him, sharp and unblinking. She stepped closer, her voice carrying through the chamber. Though the soldier did not know her language, he felt the weight of her question. It was not just curiosity, it was accusation. She wanted to know what he was, why he had come, and why the stars had brought him here. The soldier opened his mouth, his voice rough. "I am human," he said slowly, hoping his tone would soften their fear. But the word only deepened their whispers. Some stepped back, others leaned forward, their faces a mixture of fear and wonder. One maiden moved close, her fingers trembling as she touched his arm. Her skin was warm, her breath sharp as she whispered to the leader. The soldier realized the truth. They had never touched a man before. To them, he was both dangerous and sacred. The leader gave a command, and the chains of light shifted, forcing him upright against the stone pillar. She gestured to the walls, and a massive door opened, revealing a circular chamber beyond. The maidens dragged him inside, the sound of stone grinding against stone shaking the ground. It was a prison unlike any he had seen. The walls were carved with shifting runes, glowing like fireflies. Strange cages hung from the ceiling, filled with bones that did not belong to humans, and in the center stood a throne of jagged crystal. Cold and menacing, they bound him to it, the chains digging deeper. The leader leaned close, her voice sharp as a blade. Though the soldier could not understand her words, he knew their meaning. This was no ordinary prison, it was a trial, a place where strangers were judged. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes, time losing meaning in the flickering blue fire. The soldier tested the chains, but they were unbreakable, humming with energy he could not fight. From the shadows, maidens watched, their eyes fixed on him, whispering among themselves. Some with fascination, others with hatred. The soldier forced himself to stay calm. He thought of home, of earth, of battles he had survived. This was different, stranger, but the rule of survival remained the same. Never show fear, never break, never give them what they want too easily. The leader returned, her footsteps echoing like drumbeats. She carried a weapon unlike the others, a staff of black stone, tipped with fire. She circled him slowly, her eyes scanning every part of him. When she stopped, she pressed the staff to his chest, and the chains tightened. Pain surged through him, fire racing across his skin. The soldier gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out. The maidens gasped, their voices rising in shock. The leader's expression hardened. She was testing him, testing his strength. Finally, the staff pulled away, and the pain faded. The leader's voice lowered, thoughtful now, almost uncertain. The maidens began to argue, their voices clashing like blades. Some wanted him executed, others whispered of prophecy, of old legends that spoke of a man from the stars. The soldier listened, silent, piecing together fragments from their tone. Whatever choice they made, it would decide his fate. But deep inside, he knew one thing: he would not die here, not in this prison of stone. He would find a way, no matter the cost. As the chamber quieted, the leader raised her staff and pointed to him once more. Her golden eyes locked with his, and in that moment, he understood. She would not kill him, not yet. The soldier's breath steadied, his mind sharpening. This was only the beginning. They thought he was their prisoner, bound and helpless, but he knew the truth. This fortress was a cage, and cages could be broken. And somewhere within these stone walls, he would find his chance, because a soldier never surrendered. Not to fear, not to pain, and not even to warrior maidens who had never seen a man before. The human soldier sat in the prison of stone, his arms bound by glowing chains, his body aching from the crash. The blue fire from the torches flickered across his face, throwing long shadows on the walls covered with strange symbols. Dozens of warrior maidens stood around him in a circle, their golden eyes unblinking, their voices low, whispering, debating. To them, he was a living puzzle, something torn out of their myths and placed before them. The leader stood tall, her silver hair catching the firelight, her staff of black stone resting at her side. She raised her hand and silence fell, the chamber echoing with stillness. She stepped forward and spoke, her voice steady, commanding. Her eyes locked onto his, though the soldier could not understand the words. The weight of them pressed heavily against him. One maiden broke from the circle, younger than the others, her armor less scarred. Her eyes full of questions, she moved closer, her hand trembling as she reached out, touching the soldier's face as if to see if it was real. Her fingers brushed his cheek and she gasped, whispering to the others in disbelief. The circle erupted into murmurs, their voices sharp, some filled with fear, others with awe. The soldier's jaw tightened. He wanted to speak, to tell them he meant no harm, but every word he had spoken so far had only shocked them. He remembered their reaction to his voice, the way they recoiled as if the sound itself was forbidden. So he held back, his silence becoming another weapon. The leader gestured sharply, and two warriors approached, their weapons drawn. They pressed their blades to his shoulders, forcing him to kneel again. From the shadows, more maidens stepped forward, carrying object scrolls of crystal, blades of bone, strange glowing stones. They laid them at his feet, their eyes fixed on him, as if expecting him to react. The younger maiden whispered something to the leader, her voice urgent, her gestures clear. She wanted to test him, not as a prisoner, but as something unknown. The leader's eyes narrowed, then she nodded. The trial had begun. The maidens brought forward a stone tablet, its surface etched with symbols that shifted like water. They held it before the soldier, their voices chanting together. The soldier stared at the glowing symbols, his mind racing. It was no language he knew, but the way they watched him told him it was important. He shook his head slowly, his silence heavy. The maidens whispered again, some frustrated, some even laughing nervously. But then the young maiden stepped closer, her eyes soft. She pointed to the symbols, then to him, her meaning clear. She wanted him to try. The soldier leaned forward, his breath steady, and spoke one word. "Human," he said, his voice echoing across the chamber. The maidens gasped, their whispers rising into chaos. The leader's eyes widened, her grip on the staff tightening. The word meant nothing to them, but the sound, the defiance, the courage, it unsettled them. The leader barked an order, and the maidens brought forward something else. This time it was no tablet, but a creature, a small beast of sharp teeth and glowing eyes, trapped in a cage of bone. They pushed it before him and unlocked the cage. The creature leapt at him, claws flashing, teeth snapping. The soldier twisted, his chains rattling, his instincts alive. He kicked hard, knocking the beast back, his eyes locked on it. The maidens gasped again, their voices rising with excitement. He fought with only his body, his training, his will to survive. Every move he made was foreign to them, brutal, efficient, human, when he finally drove the creature back into the cage, his chest heaving, the chamber fell silent. The maidens stared at him, their awe deeper now, their fear greater. The young maiden whispered again, her voice trembling but filled with wonder. The leader listened, her eyes narrowing, her hand gripping the staff. Finally she stepped forward, pressing the staff against the soldier's chest once more. Pain burned through him, but he stood tall, unyielding, his eyes fixed on hers. The silence that followed was heavy. The maidens looked at him not as a beast, not as prey, but as something else. Something that did not break, did not bow, did not surrender. A man. The leader lowered her staff, her eyes lingering on him, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to her warriors and spoke, her voice cold but thoughtful. The whispers that followed spread through the chamber like fire. Some still wanted him dead. Others whispered of prophecy, of old legends, of fate. The soldier breathed deeply, his chain still heavy but his spirit unbroken. He did not understand their words, but he understood their eyes. They were curious now, not just afraid, and curiosity was dangerous. For in their curiosity, he saw opportunity. They wanted to know him, to study him, to test him again and again, and that meant they would keep him alive, at least for now. The soldier closed his eyes, his mind sharpening. He whispered under his breath the words only for himself, "Stay strong," because he knew this trial was not about survival, it was about becoming something more. And though the warrior maidens had never seen a man before, they would learn. They would learn what it meant to face one. And they would learn that some chains, no matter how bright, could not hold forever. The soldier's fate was not decided. In the chamber of stone, not yet. The whispers of the warrior maidens had grown louder, their curiosity burning like fire, their fear struggling against it. Some wanted him executed before his presence cursed their people. But others demanded proof of what he truly was. The leader raised her staff, her golden eyes glowing in the dim firelight, and she made her choice. He would be tested, not in chains, not in words, but in the old way, the arena. The soldier did not know the meaning of her command. But when they dragged him from the pillar and down the winding halls, he felt the shift in the air. The sound of distant roars shook the stone, and the warriors' faces were grim. Even as their eyes gleamed with anticipation, the gates opened, and the soldier was thrown into a vast circle carved deep into the mountain. Torches of blue fire lined the walls, and thousands of eyes watched from the high tiers above. The arena floor was scarred with cracks, bloodstains dried into the rock, and strange bones scattered across the ground. The maidens filled the stands, shouting, chanting, their voices rising in thunder. The soldier stood alone in the center, the chains gone, but no weapon in his hand. He turned slowly, scanning the circle, his instincts screaming that this was no trial of words. Above him, the leader raised her staff, her voice booming through the arena. The crowd answered her, their chant shaking the air, their rhythm like a drum of war. The gates across from him opened, and a beast crawled into the light. It was massive, its body plated with iron scales, its eyes glowing with fire, its jaws filled with teeth like swords. The ground trembled as it stepped forward, its growl shaking the air. The soldier clenched, his fists, his breath steady, his mind sharp. He had faced enemies before, men, machines, war itself, but never a thing like this. Still, fear was useless, and hesitation meant death. He moved quickly, searching the arena floor, scanning for anything he could use. Among the bones, he saw it of metal, broken, jagged, small but sharp. The beast charged, the ground shaking under its weight. The soldier dove to the side, rolling across the stone, grabbing the shard as he rose. The maidens roared in the stands, their voices filled with fire. The soldier turned, his eyes locked on the beast, his body ready. The monster struck again, its claws slicing into the stone, shattering the ground. The soldier leapt forward, slashing with the shard, sparks flying as metal scraped against scale. The beast roared, furious, and swung its tail. sending him crashing against the wall. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself up, his grip on the shard unbroken. The maidens shouted louder, some with bloodlust, to them. This was proof, this was truth, the trial of life and death. The soldier spat blood, wiped his mouth, and whispered to himself, "Survive." He ran forward again, faster than the beast expected, sliding beneath its swing, striking deep into the softer skin of its leg. The creature roared in agony, stumbling, its blood spraying across the arena floor, glowing like fire. The soldier rolled away, breathing hard, his body burning with exhaustion, but his mind sharp as steel. He saw it now. The beast was not invincible, not perfect. It had weaknesses. All he needed was one chance. Maidens leaned forward in their seats, their eyes wide, their chance now mixed with disbelief. No man had ever walked their world. No man had ever fought in their arena. Yet here he stood, bleeding, battered, but unbroken. The soldier tightened his grip on the shard, his heart pounding. The beast roared and lunged, its jaws wide, its claws raised. The soldier ran straight at it, his eyes blazing with defiance. At the last second, he dove beneath its chest, driving the shard into the soft flesh of its throat. The creature screamed, thrashing wildly, but the soldier held on, twisting. The shard deeper, blood poured. The beast staggered, its strength fading. With a final roar, it collapsed, the ground shaking as it fell. The soldier rolled free, gasping for air, his body shaking, his hands stained with fire-bright blood. The arena fell silent, every maiden staring down at him in disbelief. Then the silence broke, voices rose, shouts echoed, chants filled the air. Some cried for his death still, but many shouted in awe, their voices trembling with a word he could not understand, but he knew its meaning: warrior. The forbidden arena was silent once the beast lay dead, its blood glowing across the stone floor. The soldier stood over it, his chest heaving, his hands shaking but his eyes unbroken. Above him the maidens whispered, their voices clashing with confusion and awe. Some shouted for his execution. Others cried that he was a sign from the stars. The leader raised her staff. The noise faded, the arena stilled. Her golden eyes lingered on him, long and searching. Then she spoke a single command, her words sharp, echoing through the chamber. The soldiers of her guard moved at once, binding him again in chains of light, though this time their hands trembled. The soldier did not resist. He knew this was not the end, only another step. He kept his head high, his gaze steady, though pain surged through his ribs. The maidens dragged him from the arena and through the fortress halls once more. This time the stares of those they passed were different, not just fear, but wonder. At the heart of the fortress, iron gates opened into a vast chamber filled with dim firelight and shadows. The air was colder here, heavier, thick with incense that clung to the skin. Warrior maidens lined the walls in silence, their weapons lowered but their eyes burning with anticipation. At the far end of the chamber, upon a throne of black crystal, sat their queen. She was unlike the others, her body frail yet commanding, her legs unmoving, bound in chains of her own design, her back resting against a throne that seemed to keep her alive. Her eyes, though, were powerful, two burning suns that pierced through the air and fixed upon the human. The soldier felt the weight of her gaze, heavier than the chains that bound him. The maidens pushed him forward, forcing him to kneel. The queen raised her hand and silence swallowed the chamber. Her voice was softer than the others, yet it carried like thunder. The soldier could not understand her words, but he knew they were not a question, they were judgment. The leader stepped forward. Bowing before her queen, she spoke of the man, of his capture, his silence, his strength, his victory in the arena. The queen listened, her expression still, her fingers tracing the armrest of her throne. When the leader finished, the queen tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as she looked again at the soldier. The chamber filled with whispers as the queen raised her hand once more. The young maiden, the one who had touched his face, stepped forward. her voice trembling as she spoke. She argued for his life, her gestures desperate, her words spilling like water. The others murmured in disagreement, their anger and fear rising. The queen silenced them with a single glance, her eyes locked on the human, her frail body leaning forward. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed directly at him. Her voice carried one word. Heavy and final, the maidens gasped, their voices breaking into shock. The soldier did not understand the word, but he saw the fear in their eyes, the way their shoulders stiffened, the way they stepped back. It was not death she had spoken, not exile. It was something far stranger. The queen's lips curved faintly, almost into a smile. Though her eyes remained cold, she whispered more words. Her tone softer now, like a secret shared with the stars. The leader bowed again, her face grim, her golden eyes uncertain. The chamber rumbled with whispers, prophecy, omen, curse. The soldier breathed deeply, his mind racing. Whatever the queen had decided, it was not execution, not yet. She had chosen to keep him alive, but not as a prisoner of chains. There was purpose in her choice, a destiny she believed tied to him. The queen lifted her hand again, and the guards released some of the chains, leaving him bound but standing. She spoke again, her voice calm, and the maidens obeyed. They dragged him from the chamber, not to a cell, but to a place higher in the fortress, a chamber with open air, where the stars burned bright above. The soldier stood against the wind, the chains heavy, the fire in his chest stronger still. He did not know the queen's meaning, but he knew this, his survival was not chance. She had seen something in him, something her warriors could not, and that meant the game had changed, as the stars shone. Above, the soldier clenched his fists, his eyes sharp. He whispered to himself, "Find the weakness," because he knew the queen's decision was not mercy. It was a test, and the true trial had only begun. The soldier was kept in a high chamber of the fortress, a place where stone walls opened into the night sky. Chains of light still bound his wrists, but they were looser now, not meant to crush him, only to remind him that he was not free. From this height, he could see the alien valley stretching far below, glowing trees swaying in the wind, rivers of fire cutting across the land. It was beautiful, but it was also a cage, a reminder that escape was nearly impossible. Each day, warrior maidens entered the chamber, some to guard, others to watch. But one returned again and again, the young maiden who had touched his face. Her eyes were filled with questions, her steps lighter than the others, her curiosity brighter. At first, she spoke to him in her language, words he could not understand. But she did not give up. Slowly, she began to point at objects, repeating their names, waiting for him to follow. The soldier resisted at first, silent, cautious, but survival demanded adaptation. So he listened, repeated the sounds, and learned. Her laughter came when he mispronounced, her eyes shining when he succeeded. A fragile bond grew, built from broken words and gestures. The other maidens disapproved, whispering among themselves, calling her reckless, but she ignored them, her determination stronger than their warnings. In her, the soldier saw something rare: trust, curiosity, a spark that set her apart. And though he kept his guard, a part of him began to trust her. One evening, she brought him food not of chains, but of choice strange fruits. Roasted roots, meat cooked over fire. She placed it before him, and for the first time, he ate without fear of poison or mockery. She watched him closely, her eyes wide as he explained with gestures how humans cooked their food, how fire changed meat, how survival was more than strength. She listened, her lips parting in wonder, as if hearing secrets from the stars themselves. As days turned into nights, their bond grew stronger. She taught him their words, and he taught her simple human things: how to start fire with friction, how to bind wounds with cloth, how to think like a soldier. She laughed when he showed her tricks with stones and rope, but she also grew serious when he spoke of war, of survival, of loss. For the first time she looked at him not as a strange creature, But as a warrior like herself, the fortress changed too. Whispers spreading through the halls. The human had survived the arena, had spoken with the queen, and now he was teaching their own. Some called it dangerous, others called it fate. The tension grew heavier, shadows following him everywhere. Then one night, as the stars burned bright above, the young maiden led him to a hidden corner of the fortress. Her eyes darted nervously, her voice low, her words trembling. She spoke of a secret, of an enemy beyond the mountains. A race that had long hunted her people. They were coming again, stronger, hungrier, determined to end the Maidens once and for all. The soldier listened, his jaw tightening, his mind racing. The pieces fit now, the queen's decision. The prophecy, the whispers, they did not keep him alive for mercy, but because they believed he could change the coming war. The young maiden's eyes begged him for truth. Would he fight for them, or would he leave them to their fate? The soldier looked at her, his silence heavy. He thought of Earth, of his duty, of battles fought for survival. He thought of her trust, her courage, the fragile bond they had built, and slowly he nodded. A promise made not in words but in the weight of his gaze. Her shoulders eased, her eyes softening with relief. For the first time, she smiled not as a student, but as an ally. The soldier clenched his fists, his decision burning within him. If the enemy came, he would fight, not for chains, not for prophecy, but for the bond that now tied him to this world. The wind howled through the chamber, carrying the sound of distant drums. The maidens sharpened their weapons, the fortress humming with preparation. War was coming, and in their eyes, the human was no longer just a prisoner. He was something else, a warrior chosen by the stars. The soldier stood tall beneath the burning sky, his breath steady, his heart unyielding. He whispered to himself, no retreat, because he knew the rising bond was more than trust. It was destiny, and destiny was calling him to battle. The fortress of stone trembled with preparation. The warrior maidens filled the halls, their armor polished, their weapons sharpened, their chants echoing like thunder. The queen had spoken her decision, and her words carried through every corridor. This human soldier was no longer just a prisoner. He was part of their fate. Some still feared him, others despised him, but many now looked at him with a strange fire in their eyes, as if he was a sign sent by the stars. The soldier stood in the open chamber, the young maiden by his side. The chains of light that once bound him were gone, replaced with armor, crude yet strong, shaped by alien hands but fitted to his form. In his grip he held a weapon forged from both their world and his, a blade of crystal bound to the hilt of metal, salvaged from his ship. It hummed with strange energy, as if alive, as if waiting for the storm. The young maiden watched him, her eyes uncertain but hopeful. You fight with us, she whispered in broken words he now understood. The soldier nodded once, his voice steady. I fight. She smiled faintly, then turned her gaze to the mountains beyond, her face hardening with resolve. The sky above burned red as the enemy approached. Dark shapes moved across the ridges, massive beasts of war carrying warriors unlike the maidens, twisted figures with armor like bone and skin like shadows. Their roars shook the ground, their drums thundered like the heartbeat of the earth. The war the maiden had warned him of was here, and it would not wait. The queen was carried into the great hall, her frail form bound to the throne of crystal. Her eyes blazed brighter than ever. As she looked down upon her warriors, she raised her hand, her voice strong despite her weakened body. She spoke of prophecy, of fire, of survival, and of the man who had come from the stars. The maidens turned to the soldier, their chants rising. For the first time, they did not call him prisoner, beast, or stranger. They called him warrior, and in that moment, the soldier knew there was no turning back. The gates of the fortress opened, and the army marched. The ground trembled beneath their boots. The air filled with fire and steel. The soldier walked at their front, the blade in his hand glowing with strange light, his heart pounding with the rhythm of war. The young maiden walked beside him, her weapon raised, her eyes locked forward. As they crossed the valley, the enemy roared, their shadows spilling down the mountains like a flood. The clash was inevitable, a storm waiting to break. The soldier breathed deeply, the memories of Earth flashing through his mind. Battles fought, comrades lost, victories earned through blood. This war was not his, yet here he stood, bound not by chains but by choice. The first wave of the enemy charged, beasts of iron and flesh tearing across the ground, their jaws snapping, their claws glowing with fire. The soldier shouted, his voice carrying over the battlefield. The maidens followed, their war cry shaking the valley, their blades flashing like lightning. The collision came like thunder, steel against steel, fire against flesh. The soldier fought with everything he had, his blade cutting through the enemy with brutal precision. The maidens around him fought with equal fury, their movements graceful yet deadly, their bond with him now sealed by blood. The young maiden fought at his side, her strikes sharp, her courage unshaken. Together, they carved a path through the chaos, their bond stronger than fear. The enemy was vast, endless, yet the maidens did not falter, and at the heart of the storm stood the human, the man they had never seen before. The man who should not exist. Every strike he made was proof. Every breath he drew was defiance. The prophecy was no longer just words, it was alive, burning across the battlefield. From her throne, the queen watched, her eyes filled with fire. She whispered words none could hear, her lips curving into the faintest smile. The human had become more than her decision, more than her gamble. He had become their hope. As the night burned and the valley shook, the soldier raised his blade high, blood and fire dripping from its edge. The maidens roared around him, their voices carrying into the stars. And for the first time, they looked at him not as an enemy, not as a stranger, but as one of their own. The war had begun, and in that war, a bond between man and alien would be written into legend. A bond born not of chains or prophecy, but of survival, courage, and choice. The soldier tightened his grip, his voice steady as he whispered, "No retreat." And together, they charged into destiny.